If a 9-year-old boy, with no degree, no recognition from any hospital, told you he could help your granddaughter walk again, what would you do? Ignore him or listen just a little longer? Northcrest, Georgia. A cold morning. Outside the gates of St. Bridget's Children's Hospital, a place families come to when they have nowhere else left to hope. And there sat a child, silent, wearing duct-taped shoes, holding a sketchbook, and a single sentence that made the entire adult world stop in its tracks. Northcrest, Georgia, 6:18 a.m. Cold wind swept through the grey rows of housing on the city's east side. In front of the main entrance to St. Bridget's Pediatric Hospital, people flowed in like a steady current. Weary faces, urgent footsteps, pulled along by the fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant. But one person wasn't moving. He sat motionless on a worn-out piece of cardboard tucked close to the wall beside the revolving door. Head down, hands turning the crumpled pages of an old sketchbook. On his feet, duct-taped shoes, frayed, battered, and barely holding together. Noah Ellison, age 9. No name tag, no guardian, no explanation. His coat was an oversized relief shelter handout, hanging awkwardly off his thin frame. A beanie pulled low over his forehead hid most of his face, but in the brief moments when someone walked by, if they looked closely enough, they'd see his eyes wide open, watching, recording, as if every person passing by was part of an equation only he was trying to solve. He didn't ask for money, didn't speak, didn't disturb. He just sat there and drew. Quick, sure strokes of pencil captured it all: the silhouettes of the sick, the pillboxes, the nurses' hands, doctors' expressions, parents' gestures. He sketched everything, and no one knew. That very spot where he sat was the same place his mother, Celeste Ellison, had once been asked to leave by a hospital security guard 3 years ago for not having an appointment. She was a skilled therapist, but uninsured. Rejected from employment at St. Bridget's, despite saving lives at community clinics. She died because she didn't receive her medication in time, and Noah, from that day on, became a silent shadow haunting the system that had turned its back on his mother. He never spoke of it, but every time he put pencil to page, it whispered, "I'm still here. I never left." An elderly security guard stepped outside and spotted Noah. He opened his mouth to say something, then simply nodded. Quiet recognition. They all knew this boy. No one knew where he came from. But on mornings when he didn't appear, something felt missing. At the corner, a silver Range Rover pulled up. Inside, a father and a 6-year-old girl sleeping under a pink blanket. Noah lifted his head. His eyes began to move, scanning, absorbing every detail. And as the car door opened, fate, not just for one person, had just stepped into the frame. 6:24 a.m. The silver Range Rover had just shut off. The windows were still fogged with breath. Inside, Daniel Whitmore sat frozen for a few seconds, fingers tightening slightly around the steering wheel. His eyes were puffy, his tie crooked, his leather shoes scuffed and dull. But in the back seat, Aria, his 6-year-old daughter, slept quietly under a pink blanket. No tossing, no murmuring. She had grown used to staying. Still, since the accident, Aria had lost all mobility in the lower half of her body. Doctors called it acute spinal cord trauma. Daniel called it a waking nightmare. He stepped out, opened the back door, and gently lifted his daughter like cradling fragile glass. Aria rested her head on his shoulder, eyes open, but not looking toward the hospital. She was looking up at the sky, as if searching for another place to exist. Daniel moved quickly toward the revolving door. Everything was going as expected until a quiet voice rang out, not loud, not shaky, not hesitant. "I can help her walk again." Daniel froze just 5 steps from the hospital entrance. He turned his head. A boy, coat far too big, shoes wrapped in duct tape, was rising from a flattened cardboard mat. Clutching a sketchbook to his chest, he stared straight ahead, eyes unblinking. It wasn't a question, it wasn't a sales pitch, it was a statement. Calm, as if it was simply a fact. Daniel frowned. "What did you just say?" The boy took 1 step forward. Not threatening, but not retreating either. "I said, I can help her walk again." Silence. Inside the doors, doctors and nurses continued to bustle about. Outside, a father's breath hovered in the cold air. Daniel looked around quickly, searching for a witness, but no one was paying attention. Just the boy, alone. "My mom used to help people like that. I just need 1 hour. I won't charge anything." Daniel paused, then slowly shook his head. "This isn't something to joke about." "I'm not joking." Noah's voice wasn't raised, but something about the way he spoke made everything Daniel thought he knew about medicine feel less certain. Daniel turned away, clenched his hand tighter, and walked toward the hospital doors. But this time, his steps weren't as steady as before. Inside St. Bridget's Pediatric Hospital, Daniel sat in silence outside the treatment room. Arya still hadn't spoken. Her eyes drifted far away, avoiding every glance, every gaze. But in Daniel's mind, one sentence kept echoing, "I can help her walk again." He should have forgotten it, just a street kid with duct-taped shoes. And yet, the way that boy said it, no smile, no plea, no hesitation, cut into Daniel like it might actually be true. All afternoon he couldn't focus on the doctor's words. "Recovery will be very difficult. No progress yet. We're doing our best." Doing our best. That phrase again, always just trying. Late afternoon, on the way back to the car, Daniel carried Arya in his arms, walking briskly through the revolving door. No glancing around, no intention to stop, but a soft voice came from behind. Not loud, not begging. "I'll still be at Silver Grove Park this Sunday, like always." Daniel turned. Noah was still there beside his flattened cardboard, clutching his worn sketchbook. Eyes steady, not expectant. Just waiting. No pressure. Just an open door. For someone desperate enough to walk through it. Daniel stood frozen for a long moment, then walked away. No reply, no acknowledgement. But in his mind, that unspoken invitation had taken root. He was a father. He wasn't allowed to believe in the impossible, but he also couldn't forget that a child had done something no doctor dared, looked straight at his pain and gave it a name. Sunday, 11:57 a.m. Silver Grove Park was quiet. Old swings creaked in the breeze and patches of sunlight flickered across the fading yellow grass. Beneath an old oak tree on a weathered wooden bench, Noah Ellison had been sitting there since early morning. No watch, no phone, only a neatly folded cloth, a warm pouch of rice wrapped in fabric, a worn tennis ball, and his faded sketchbook by his side. He watched each car pass, not hoping, just observing. 12:03 p.m. sharp. A silver-grey SUV pulled up and stopped near the edge of the grass. No greetings, no friendly gestures. Daniel Whitmore opened the back door and gently lifted Arya out. She remained silent, her eyes briefly passing over Noah, then holding there. Daniel pushed her wheelchair toward the bench. Noah stood and nodded, respectful but not timid. "Thank you for coming," Noah said. "Not for you," Daniel replied. "She wanted to." Silence. Arya gave a faint smile, the kind of short, careful smile children learn from years of unmet hope. Noah spread the cloth on the grass. From his fabric pouch, he pulled out the warm rice pack and gently placed it on Arya's lap. She shivered slightly. "It's so warm," she murmured. Daniel leaned in instantly. "Are you okay?" "Yes. It feels nice," Arya answered, for the first time a flicker of brightness in her voice. Noah took the tennis ball and rolled it beneath the sole of Arya's foot. Back and forth, no pressure, no rush, no unnecessary words. My mum used to say, sometimes the body doesn't need to be pushed, it just needs to be reminded. Daniel looked up at Noah for the first time with different eyes. This boy wasn't dramatic. He didn't claim miracles. He simply worked, carefully, quietly, as if deeply familiar with the pain of others. 15 minutes passed. Noah gently touched Arya's knee. "Can you feel anything?" Arya furrowed her brow. "Feels like someone's touching from inside." Daniel stopped breathing, not because it was a miracle, but because, for the first time in months, his daughter was using her own words to describe something inside her body. No machines, no medication, no sterile treatment rooms, only grass, wind, and a boy carrying the memory of his mother in his hands. The midday breeze brushed through Noah's curly hair, sunlight glinting off his ears, red from the cold. Still, he stayed bent low, carefully rolling the tennis ball beneath Arya's sole like he was working inside a lab of his own making. Daniel Whitmore stood nearby, arms crossed, his gaze once cold, now clouded with confusion. "Who taught you to do all this?" he asked, suspicion thinly veiled. Noah didn't look up. "My mother." A pause. Daniel frowned slightly. "What did she do?" "She was a physical therapist, but the hospital wouldn't hire her." Now Noah stopped. He looked up, and for the first time since they'd met, he met Daniel's eyes. His voice was calm, but something tightened behind it. Like a memory he didn't want to speak, but couldn't forget. "Her name was Celeste Ellison. She applied to work at St. Bridget's, where your daughter's being treated now, but they rejected her, not because she wasn't good, but because she didn't have a fancy degree, and because she was a black woman from the wrong side of town." Daniel froze. Noah went on. "She ended up working at a community clinic. After school, I followed her, carried her bag, grabbed towels, learned how to massage, memorized every muscle, every nerve. I watched her help a veteran walk again, after 5 years in a wheelchair, no machines, no doctors." The wind rustled through the trees above them. Arya sat still, eyes wide. She didn't understand everything, but she sensed that something important had just been said. "Where is she now?" Daniel asked softly. Noah went quiet, then reached for the sketchbook beside him. He turned a page, revealing a pencil drawing. A thin woman kneeling to place her hands on a patient's legs. Her hair tied neatly back, her face undefined, but all the light in the drawing seemed to come from her. "She's gone. They didn't treat her in time because she didn't have insurance." Daniel swallowed hard. "Do you hate them for it?" Noah shook his head. "Hating them won't bring her back. I just don't want someone like Arya to have to wait for a white coat to touch hope." Then from the silence Arya spoke. "I can feel my knees. A little tingly." but it's real. Daniel looked at his daughter. Not a miracle, but for the first time since the accident, he saw light rising from inside her fragile little body. Noah stayed still, didn't smile. He simply placed a hand on his sketchbook and whispered, as if to his mother, "I remember everything you taught me." And today, someone felt it. 1 week after the meeting in Silver Grove Park, the Whitmore family tried again, this time at home. Daniel laid a soft mat across the living room floor. Aria sat in her chair, legs wrapped in a warm blanket. What that boy, Noah Ellison, had done that day had made it impossible for Daniel not to hope. He gently asked his daughter, "Do you want to try today?" Aria nodded, her eyes lit up, like there was still a flame flickering inside her. Daniel carefully unwrapped her legs and placed her small feet on the mat. He tried to mimic Noah's movements, gentle massages, knee presses, pressure points. But minutes passed. And nothing, no reaction, no movement. Aria's brow furrowed, her eyes began to redden, and then she broke into tears. "I hate this. I hate hope. It hurts more than giving up." Daniel froze. "Aria, I thought something changed that day. I thought I was about to walk. But nothing happened. It hurts more than never believing at all." He reached to hold her, but she pulled away gently, tugging the blanket back over her legs. Her small shoulders trembled. Daniel could only watch as his little girl curled into herself like she wanted to disappear. And once again, every shred of belief in him collapsed. That very evening, Daniel drove alone to Silver Grove Park. He didn't bring Aria, only the wind and his own spiraling doubts. And Noah Ellison, still sitting silently on that wooden bench beneath the old oak like always. Daniel approached, unable to hide the anger in his voice. "You shouldn't have said what you said. You shouldn't have made promises you weren't sure you could keep." Noah didn't respond right away. He just looked down at the ground. Then softly he spoke. "I didn't promise she'd walk again. I only said I wanted to try." Daniel shook his head. "To a child like Aria, hope isn't a game. She believed in you." Noah looked up, eyes steady, unshaken. "So did I." Silence, so deep, only the sound of leaves rustling above remained. Then Daniel turned and walked away. But that night, the boy named Noah Ellison stayed on that bench, clutching his mother's old sketchbook. Cold wind brushing against his duct-taped shoes, and in his heart something began to fracture. Not his faith, but the fear that for the first time he might have made someone hurt the way the system once hurt his mother. Morning. The South Bus station on the outskirts of North Crest was as empty as usual. Cold wind slipped through the cracked glass panels. On the last concrete bench of the station, Noah Ellison sat with knees drawn to his chest, a small backpack beside him, his mother's worn sketchbook across his lap, and his duct-taped shoes resting silently next to an empty soda can. He was planning to leave North Crest. No goodbyes, no destination, just a few clothes and the memories no one ever asked about. The page in front of him was an unfinished drawing, a curly-haired girl standing, arms outstretched in the middle of a park. But the legs were missing. Noah sat motionless. He couldn't draw them. Cold light caught on the string binding the sketchbook, once a hair tie belonging to his mother, Celeste Ellison. Every time he touched it, he saw her again, kneeling in the community clinic, massaging the legs of a paralyzed veteran. No money, no insurance, no machines. "I'm not you," Noah whispered, his voice breaking. "I can't do it." The distant sound of a bus horn echoed through the morning. Noah gripped the sketchbook tighter, stood. His heart pounded. A voice in his head screamed, "Leave before they hate you, before they realize you can't fix anything." He took one step out from under the shelter, then stopped. His small arms clutched the sketchbook close. Cold wind whipped through his thin coat. Noah closed his eyes. In his mind appeared the image of Aria Whitmore dash. The look of disappointment in her eyes, her tiny hand pushing her father away, pulling the blanket over herself. Not because she hated anyone, but because hope had hurt her again. Noah collapsed back onto the bench, both hands covering his face. A single tear fell onto the page. And for the first time since his mother's death, he admitted something he had never dared say aloud. "I'm tired too, but I don't want anyone else to be as tired as my mom was." And then forgotten. He didn't get on the bus. It pulled away. Noah stayed seated, a small figure in a vast, uncaring city. But this time something had changed. His eyes, though rimmed red, no longer looked like they were giving up. He just didn't know yet how to begin again. Late that afternoon, a gentle rain began to fall over North Crest. At the bus stop where Noah Ellison still sat, cold wind swept across the damp concrete. He no longer knew how long he had been there. Knees drawn in, his mother's sketchbook resting in his lap, raindrops now soaking into the page edges. He didn't care. Until he heard soft footsteps, faint but distinct, approaching from behind. Noah? He turned his head. It was Aria Whitmore. Hood pulled up over her head, one hand gripping her wheelchair's rim, her brown eyes gazing up at him. Behind her stood Daniel Whitmore, her father, keeping his distance under the awning of a nearby pharmacy. He held an umbrella, said nothing, just watched the two children in silence. Noah lowered his head and murmured, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything if I wasn't sure I could follow through." Aria didn't answer right away. She pulled something from her coat pocket, a small handkerchief, old and a little wrinkled, the one her mother used to wipe her face before physical therapy sessions. "I brought this because I thought it might rain." She reached forward and gently laid the handkerchief over Noah's wet sketchbook. He froze. "Why, did you come find me?" Aria's voice trembled, soft but steady. "Because you were the first person who believed I could still do something. Not a doctor, not a nurse, you." She paused, then added, "I don't need someone to cure me. I just need someone to believe that I haven't given up." That sentence, quiet as it was, cut through the knot of self-doubt coiled tightly around Noah's heart. He bit his lip. Hands shaking, he gently closed the sketchbook, then stood up. He didn't say anything else. He simply stepped toward Aria, opened his backpack, and pulled out the fabric-wrapped pouch of warm rice. Wrapping it carefully again, turning to Daniel, he said quietly, "If it's okay with you, I'd like to see Aria again tomorrow, at Silver Grove Park." Daniel looked at Noah, and for the first time, not with caution, but as a father seeing light flicker in his daughter's eyes again. And knowing that wasn't something to stand in the way of. He nodded. Noah walked home in the rain, shoes soaked, hair tangled, still clutching the warm little handkerchief in his hand. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was chasing his mother's shadow. He was continuing her path, for someone who truly needed him. Sunday noon, Silver Grove Park. The sky above North Crest was unusually clear. Sunlight filtered through the old oak's leaves, casting golden beams across the grass. where today there weren't just a cloth and a small pouch of supplies, but 3 people: Noah Ellison, Aria Whitmore, and Daniel Whitmore. The mat was laid out carefully, the rice pack was warmed, the tennis ball rested quietly nearby. Noah knelt before Aria like always, but this time there was no rush. "Are you ready?" Aria nodded, no smile, no words, just a firm, silent nod. Noah began warming her thigh, then her knee, then her calf. Daniel stood behind his daughter, one hand lightly resting on the armrest of her wheelchair. Not to hold her back, but to be ready. To let go. "Now I'm going to lift your foot a little, okay? If you feel pressure, breathe slowly." Aria followed his instruction. As Noah gently raised her ankle, he asked, "Do you feel anything?" Aria closed her eyes. After a moment, she whispered, "I'm not sure, but it's like a small voice inside." Noah smiled, said nothing, just placed his hand firmly over the top of her foot. "Now try pressing your heel down a little, like you're stepping on grass." A long beat of silence. Then a press, barely visible, but real. Daniel leaned down, eyes wide. "Aria, did you just—" "I really did, Dad," she whispered, as if saying it too loud might scare it away. Noah didn't beam. He simply stepped back, watching quietly from a short distance. Sometimes the body just needs to be heard, and it will answer. Daniel stood frozen. "You did what St. Bridget's couldn't in 6 months." Noah lowered his head. "I didn't do anything miraculous, sir. Aria's body is the miracle. I just reminded it that it once knew how to walk." Daniel dropped onto a bench, his eyes brimming. Not because a miracle had arrived, but because for the first time he realized maybe it had never left. And across the park, Nurse Angela Monroe from St. Bridget's had just happened to pass by. She froze. She had seen it, that subtle movement, that tearful smile on a father's face, and in that moment she knew something had truly shifted, not just in Aria's legs, but in an entire system that had long believed only machines and medicine could heal a human being. 1 week later, Silver Grove Park. What was once a quiet patch of grass had become a gathering place. Small groups of families had begun to appear. Not for picnics. They came because they'd heard a story. About a boy with worn shoes, no degree, no lab coat, who helped a paralyzed girl lift her foot for the first time in months. Noah Ellison arrived right on time. Still wearing his oversized charcoal grey jacket, sleeves rolled up, sweat lining his wrists as he lugged the familiar canvas bag of supplies. His boots, still the old ones, the toes wrapped tightly in silver duct tape. But today, when people looked at them, they didn't see broken shoes. They saw badges of honor. Aria Whitmore was already there, seated in her wheelchair, holding Noah's sketchbook, the one he'd left behind the week before. As Noah approached, she lifted it and smiled. "You drew the park, even the big oak tree." Noah nodded. "It's the first place I believed something might actually change." Nearby, a woman approached, holding the hand of a boy around 7, walking with crutches. "Excuse me, my son had an accident last year. We couldn't afford to keep him in therapy at the hospital. A nurse told me about you. Would it be okay if we—" Noah didn't answer immediately. He turned toward Daniel Whitmore, who sat quietly on a bench nearby, observing everything. Daniel gave a soft, approving nod. Noah set down his bag and pulled out an extra cloth mat. Gently, he said, "You're welcome to sit with him. I'm only using what my mum taught me." I don't replace doctors, I don't promise miracles. But if he wants to try, I'm here. Tears welled in the mother's eyes. The little boy hesitated, then slowly sat on the mat, staring curiously at Noah's boots. Mister, why are your shoes taped up? Noah bent down and smiled. Because they used to be torn, but I didn't want to throw them away. Like my legs, the boy whispered. Noah nodded gently. Yeah, just like that. Sometimes all they need is someone to believe they can still move forward. From a distance, a passerby stopped to watch. Then another family arrived. By late afternoon, more than 8 families had gathered beneath the old oak tree. No machines, no loudspeakers, just cloth mats, a few tennis balls, warm rice pouches, and a boy in duct-taped shoes, quietly restoring a kind of faith that had long been taken from them. Daniel leaned toward Arya. You know, he said, every time your foot lifts off the ground, it's a slap in the face to those who said you never would. Arya squeezed his hand. No, Dad, it's a reminder that they were wrong. From that day forward, the people of North Crest no longer called him that kid from the hospital gates. They gave Noah Ellison a new name, the boy with duct tape wings. Monday morning, St. Bridget's Pediatric Hospital. Nurse Angela Monroe, head nurse of the Pediatric Rehabilitation Unit, stood silently by the coffee machine in the staff lounge. In her hand was the freshly printed edition of the local paper, the North Crest Post. Across page 2, in bold font, the headline read, The Boy with Duct Tape Wings, Healing Through Memory and Belief. Accompanying the article, a distant, grainy photo. The face was unclear, but for anyone who worked at the hospital, the figure was unmistakable. The same small silhouette that had sat outside the entrance for months. Grey coat, worn pants, duct-taped shoes. Noah Ellison. Angela set the paper down and walked quickly to the technical consult room. She knocked 3 times, then entered without waiting. You all need to see this. Inside were 3 pediatric physical therapists, a program administrator, and the head of patient coordination. All of them had seen Noah before, but none had ever truly looked. Is this the kid who always sits outside sketching? One doctor asked, frowning. Angela nodded. Remember the girl who dropped out of our rehab program halfway through? Aria Whitmore, daughter of Daniel Whitmore, big real estate name in the region. He said he wanted to try alternative therapy. Who would have thought it'd work? Wait, she can walk now. Angela didn't answer. She pulled out her phone and tapped on a video. A clip quietly circulating in a parents' group chat. Not an official report, just a shaky, distant phone recording. Aria, standing, trembling, then stepping. 3 seconds, 3 steps. Angela's voice was low, firm. That boy didn't use electrical stimulation, no medication, no machines, just a warm rice pouch, a few gentle exercises. And a method our field seems to have forgotten. Go slow, listen, trust. The room fell completely silent. Someone whispered, "What's his name?" Angela replied, eyes still on the screen, Noah Ellison. A name that appeared in no patient records, no file, no insurance ID. Just a child who once sat outside their hospital and now was making the entire system question itself. That evening, Tasha Linwood, the journalist from the North Crest Post who wrote the article, received an anonymous message. Thank you for not printing Noah's full name. He doesn't want to be known. He just wants people to remember the kids who stood up again. Tasha sat quietly before her screen, hands resting on the keyboard. She had never met Noah. but somehow it felt like she had just written about a slow-burning flame, one that could warm an entire city. Wednesday afternoon, South Administration Office, St. Bridget's Pediatric Hospital. On the desk of the Director of Community Health Programs, a new proposal had just been placed. Partnership to support equipment sponsorship, clinical consultation, and potential scholarship consideration for Noah Ellison. Attached was a photo, a 9-year-old boy kneeling on a patch of grass, lifting the heel of a smiling young patient. Below the image, a headline clipped from the Birmingham Post. The boy who remembers strength. At that same moment in Silver Grove Park, Daniel Whitmore approached Noah, who was neatly packing his therapy tools as he did every Sunday. "I just got a call," Daniel said, "from the leadership at St. Bridget's." Noah didn't turn around. He was folding the cloth used to warm muscles. "Because of Aria?" Daniel nodded. "And because of you. They want to partner, provide better equipment, expand your Sunday sessions, and maybe offer you a scholarship." Noah stood and turned, not surprised but with something else in his eyes. A quiet coldness. "That's the place that turned my mother away." Daniel froze. Noah looked down at his hands, the same small hands that once clutched his mother's wrist, when she could no longer breathe. They said she didn't have the proper credentials to be part of their system. They said she was passionate but not professional. They said, sorry wasn't enough. He looked up, his gaze cutting through time. And now they want to help? Because I made the papers. Because Mr. Whitmore's daughter moved her foot in front of them. Daniel didn't defend. He simply said, it's not because you need them. It's because there are other children who will need you, and you'll need more tools to help them. Noah's fists clenched. Then slowly he exhaled and let them relax. I don't want a scholarship in their name, but if they want to help, they'll do it on my terms. Daniel smiled softly. And what do you want? Noah opened his backpack and pulled out a handmade card. In careful handwriting it read, "The Celeste Ellison Healing Spot. For every child with no insurance, no chart, just pain no one bothered to record." He looked Daniel in the eye. They can send tools, books, therapy kits, but the name on the program won't be Noah Ellison. It'll be hers. Daniel nodded slowly. I'll tell them that. And the next morning, during a meeting at St. Bridget's, one line was officially recorded in the meeting minutes. We are not sponsoring a child. We are atoning for a woman we never bothered to listen to. As Noah left the park that day, wind brushed gently against the collar of his oversized coat. The duct tape still held tight around the toes of his boots. But in his heart, a new door had opened. One that had been slammed shut on his mother was now being opened in her name. Late afternoon, the wind had picked up in Northcrest. In the western corner of Silver Grove Park, the therapy session had ended. Aria Whitmore rested quietly under the tree canopy, while Daniel Whitmore and Noah Ellison packed away their tools. The air was still, not from exhaustion, but because Noah had just been handed a copy of an old document by an elderly nurse from St. Bridget's. She had quietly passed it to Daniel. Inside was an employment application. Celeste Ellison, Noah's mother. Stamped across the top, does not meet hospital administrative standards. Date submitted, March 2015. Daniel stared at the words when Noah approached, but Noah had already seen them. I know, Noah said, eyes locked on the page. I've guessed for a long time. Daniel folded the paper slowly, his voice low. You can push the whole world away, Noah, but don't let anger stop you from doing what's right. Noah was quiet. I'm not angry because they let my mom die, he said softly. I'm angry because after that, no one even remembered her name. A long silence. The wind stirred through the trees, almost holding its breath. She saved so many people. She massaged knees, joints, bones, no machines, no titles. But when she was the one in pain, they didn't listen. They never even spoke her name again. Noah's hands clenched, his eyes rimmed red, but the tears stayed in. I thought, if I got better, if I proved something, maybe they'd remember, maybe she wouldn't be forgotten. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. Noah, you've done more than prove something. You turned loss into something people can feel. You've made it impossible for the world to ignore Celeste Ellison ever again. Noah nodded slowly. I don't need a statue, but I need her name to be written, in the place it always should have been. That day, as he left the park, Noah paused by the old wooden bench near the tree. From his backpack, he pulled out a small wooden plaque, hand-carved and painted by him. On it were the words, "This place is for Celeste Ellison, the first to teach me that you don't need a degree to touch a broken heart." He mounted it silently. No announcement, no ceremony, only the wind bore witness, and a quiet, permanent sign that said, "The truth, once revealed, would never again be buried in shadow." Monday morning, rare sunshine broke through over North Crest after a string of grey, rainy days. Daniel Whitmore stepped onto the porch of his two-story home, steam curling from the coffee mug in his hand. At the gate stood a small figure, backpack frayed at the straps, a blanket rolled and tied to the side, arms wrapped around a small cardboard box. Noah Ellison. He stood still, as if unsure whether his own feet were allowed to cross the threshold. Daniel didn't say much, just nodded, voice steady. "Come on in, Noah. You have no idea how loud Arya's going to scream when she sees you." The door swung open. Arya came barreling down the stairs. No wheelchair. She wrapped her arms tightly around Noah, laughing. "I've been waiting all morning." Noah scratched his head, smiled faintly, then quietly stepped inside, into a home where no one asked for credentials or proof of relatives. Only the scent of warm pastries, the sound of running water, and a small corner of the kitchen where a stack of books had already been placed, waiting for him. That evening, Noah shared his first dinner in his new home. No ceremony, no visitors. Just 3 people, 2 sets of chopsticks, and one question from Daniel. "Noah, have you thought about going back to school?" Noah looked at him, then at Arya. "I have. But this time, I want to study the body to understand it better, not to be approved by anyone." Daniel smiled. "Then I'll find a school for you, son." For the first time, Noah didn't flinch at the word son. He simply passed a sweet potato dumpling to Arya's plate, as if it was something he'd been doing for years. That night, the living room lights remained dim, but the glow from the window lit the face of a boy who once had no name, no place, no future anyone saw. Noah was asleep on the sofa, his mother's old sketchbook, Celeste Ellison, resting gently on the pillow beside him. Outside, the wind stirred softly, carrying something, like a whisper unspoken. "You don't have to live the life I lived, but if you can heal without needing praise, then you're already stronger than I ever was." Not everyone who heals carries a degree. Not every act of faith begins in a hospital, and not every miracle needs magic. Noah Ellison didn't wear a white lab coat. He had no clinic, no formal credentials, just a pair of small hands, taught by a mother now gone, and a heart, That didn't wait for the world's permission to begin giving. He didn't change the entire medical field. He changed a park, a little girl, a father, and then one child after another, one family after another, Sunday by Sunday, step by step. We often ask, who gave a child the right to do this? But perhaps the better question is, who listened long enough to realize he deserved to? Because there are some, even small ones, who are brave enough to stand against being forgotten, and loving enough to do what the system abandoned long ago, to believe that the human body, no matter how broken or fragile, still remembers how to rise. It only needs someone willing to stay long enough to remind it.